Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for high-speed sprint up what many of you know all too well as the Fluency Mountain.
It's a very familiar feeling, isn't it?
It really is. It's this problem every language learner faces, I think, no matter how dedicated they are.
Yeah.
You've got years of grammar rules stored away. You've memorized these huge piles of vocabulary. You can even read complex articles. But then a native speaker talks to you at, real conversational speed, or you try to say something yourself.
And it all just hesitates.
It stutters, or it just seems to vaporize entirely. That leap from knowing stuff about a language to actually using it smoothly, it can feel impossible.
That is the classic proficiency paradox. Exactly. You have the map, all the theoretical knowledge, but you just can't navigate the territory in real time under pressure.
Right.
So our source stack for today is focused entirely on that gap. We're going deep on a technique called shadowing.
Shadowing. I've heard this term thrown around a lot. It's used by some really high-performance language users, right?
The highest. Think professional interpreters who need that instant recall. Polyglots who seem to master languages with impossible speed. Even actors trying to nail a specific dialect.
And our mission for this deep dive is to go beyond just the simple definition of that.
Yeah.
We really need to extract the precise steps, the neurological how, and the practical why this exercise can be, a secret weapon for real fluency.
Yes, moving you from knowing the language to actually performing it.
Exactly.
Performing it.
And the material we reviewed is, it's remarkably extensive. It gives a true 360-degree view. We're talking everything from the deep neuroscience, the auditory motor circuits in the brain, all the way down to these really practical, level-specific guides on what materials to pick and how to track your progress.
So the goal here is to pull out those critical pieces that help you, the listener, move beyond just passively taking in English and start really activating your speaking skills.
In a smooth, real-time feedback loop. That's the key. Okay, let's unpack this technique. So, to start at the very beginning, what is shadowing, really? The sources seem to make a big deal about the difference between this and, say, just repeating a phrase you hear in a class.
Yeah, and that distinction is everything. At its foundation, shadowing is a deceptively simple idea. You listen to spoken language.
An audiobook, a podcast, whatever.
Exactly. High-quality audio is best, and you repeat it aloud immediately after you hear it. You're aiming to be as close to simultaneous as you can manage.
Almost speaking at the same time.
Almost. But here's the crucial part, the thing that makes it so much more than just parroting. You are matching not just the words, not just the dictionary definition.
You're matching the sound.
You're matching the entire acoustic package. Yeah. Their rhythm, the intonation, the stress on certain words, the speaker's speed, and this is a big one, even the emotional tone of the speaker.
The origins of this are really compelling to me. The sources trace it back to professional interpreter training. Why there? That's such a high-stakes environment.
Well, it's purely functional. Interpreters can't afford a delay. They need instantaneous processing and absolutely perfect reproduction, often under immense cognitive load.
So it was born out of necessity.
Completely. It was refined in those circles because it trained the speed and the fidelity they needed. The material points to pioneers like Dr. Alexander R. Gwells, who sort of took this professional method and systemized it for language learners.
And now it's something polyglots and even speech pathologists use.
They swear by it because it tackles the physical hurdles. It's about bridging that gap between knowing a sound in your head and actually physically producing it with your mouth quickly and accurately. Yeah. It forces that passive knowledge into active muscle memory.
Okay, so let's be super precise about the timing, because this feels important. If I listen to a podcast, hit pause, and then repeat the sentence, that's not shadowing.
That's standard repetition, echoing, which is useful, but it's not this.
But if I try to speak almost at the same time as the host, maybe just a syllable or two behind, that's shadowing.
That is shadowing.
That sounds absolutely exhausting and honestly really frustrating.
Isn't there a danger people will just get discouraged and give up?
And that's the point of friction. The sources really emphasize that the initial frustration is a sign that it's working.
How so?
Because it's fighting your brain's default sequential way of doing things. Think about normal repetition. You hear the sentence, you store it, you consciously process it, then you speak. It's a slow, step-by-step chain.
Right. Hear, think, speak.
Shadowing destroys that leisure time. It forces real-time processing and production. You're holding the beginning of the sound pattern in your short-term memory while your mouth is already forming the next sound right on the speaker's heels.
So you're not rehearsing something you memorized.
You're improvising. You're forcing the system to run on intuition and motor function, not slow, conscious planning.
Okay, that makes the exhaustion make a lot more sense. It's like a workout. You're demanding a reaction time that matches a real conversation. And you mentioned the nuance. It's not enough to just get the words right. You have to get the melody. Absolutely. The analogy the sources use is that you're wearing the native speaker's full linguistic costume.
I like that.
And that includes their musicality. Every language has its own melody, right? Its stress patterns, where the pitch rises and falls, the pauses, the whole tempo.
So if you only say the words correctly, you can still sound robotic.
Robotic, or just difficult to understand because you missed all the emotional and structural cues. Shadowing forces you to copy the flow, the speed, the subtle emotion where they put the emphasis.
So it's this multi-skill integration. It's activating listening, speaking, rhythm all at once.
And reading, too, if you're using a transcript. It's the engine that transforms that passive input into active, fluent speech.
The sources had a brilliant analogy for this. They said it's the difference between a musician practicing isolated scales
and playing along with a complex piece of music.
Exactly.
And that analogy is perfect. The scales, that's your grammar study, your flashcards. They're necessary building blocks, of course.
But scales don't teach you rhythm or timing or expression.
Not at all. Playing along with the full piece forces you to match speed, anticipate changes, capture the emotion. It's performance practice. Shadowing is high-stakes performance practice for the complex composition of natural English.
So it's making the language physical, automatic.
Fundamentally, it changes how your brain even interacts with the input.
Which feels like it's tapping into our most basic, primitive way of learning language in the first place, which is just mimicry.
Precisely. And that leads us right into the science of why this actually works so well.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. I love how the sources frame this around what they call the infant model. Babies don't start with grammar books. They listen. And they mimic sounds and intonation constantly. They are, in essence, professional shadowers.
They absolutely are. And the human brain is just fundamentally wired for that kind of auditory mimicry. That pathway is ancient, and it's incredibly powerful. A baby gets its native accent not from rules, but from constantly trying to reproduce the sound patterns they hear. Shadowing just hijacks that same powerful learning mechanism.
So let's get into the 4 key scientific mechanisms the sources identified. The first one seems to be the most critical, activating the auditory motor circuits. What is that actually doing in the brain?
This is the neurological core of the whole thing. So when you hear a sound, that information goes to your auditory cortex.
Okay.
When you speak, that's controlled by the motor cortex, which moves your tongue, your lips, your jaw.
2 different areas.
2 different areas. When you do both at the same time, hearing, processing, and producing, you are physically creating and strengthening high-speed neural links or circuits between those 2 areas.
So you're building a bridge.
Think of it more like building a dedicated high-speed bypass lane on a highway. Passive study builds a slow, winding road that goes from the hearing center through the grammar analysis center and then eventually over to the speech production center.
Right, the scenic route.
The very scenic route. Shadowing builds a direct freeway from sound processing straight to speech production. It bypasses that slow, conscious, internal translator.
So the goal is literally to short-circuit that inner monologue, the one that makes you hesitate and stutter.
Precisely. It forces automaticity under pressure, which brings us to the second mechanism. It improves your oral memory.
Oral memory, so your memory for sounds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you're trying so hard to match the speaker's unique intonation, their rhythm, the whole musicality, your brain has to hold that complex sound pattern in your short-term memory with far greater detail than if you were just passively listening.
So you're not just remembering words, you're remembering whole phrases with the melody attached.
Yes. You're memorizing sound patterns, not isolated data points, and that means you remember them longer and more accurately. You remember natural word groupings, what linguists call collocations.
Which leads right into the third mechanism, which is more physical, the automation of pronunciation. This is a huge hurdle for so many people, making sounds that just don't exist in their native language.
We can't overstate the physical component here. Speaking a new language is a complex motor skill. You're moving your mouth and tongue in unfamiliar ways to make sounds like, I don't know, the sound in English.
Right.
The constant, repetitive, immediate action of shadowing literally rewires those physical articulators. It moves those complex movements into your muscle memory.
So you stop having to think, Okay, where does my tongue go for this sound?
Exactly. It just goes there. It becomes automatic. And that frees up so much of your brain power to focus on the meaning of what you're saying, not the mechanics.
It's like an athlete training a specific move over and over until it's just instinct.
That's a perfect analogy. You don't learn a golf swing by reading a book. You need the physical reps. And the final mechanism, deepening listening comprehension, might seem a little counterintuitive.
Yeah, how does speaking over someone help you understand them better?
It's the auditory boot camp effect. Your brain adapts to what it's forced to process. When you're constantly struggling to keep up with natural, rapid-fire English with all its blended sounds and reductions.
Like gonna for going to.
Exactly what linguists call elision. Your brain has no choice but to adapt. It gets better at filtering and processing speech at authentic native speeds. You become a better listener because you're running the production model at the same time.
Beyond all the hard science, the sources also talk a lot about the psychological benefits. The confidence boost.
This is huge. It's the ultimate psychological rehearsal. You are rehearsing real-life English under realistic time pressure.
So when you're in a real conversation, it doesn't feel so new and scary.
It feels familiar. The fear of making mistakes goes way down because the movements aren't novel anymore. Your fluency skyrockets. Your responses become more automatic. You start thinking in chunks and phrases, not just individual words.
And this isn't just theory. The sources cite actual research to back this up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a finding that professional interpreters trained with shadowing consistently outperform those who just use rote memorization. That's compelling.
And there was a specific study mentioned. Lambert?
The Lambert study, back in 1992, it found that dedicated shadowers significantly improved their accent, their rhythm, and their comprehension in just a few weeks. The evidence, both from research and from coaches, is overwhelming. This works because it targets the way humans are built to learn language in the first place.
Okay, so we know why it's so powerful. Now, the crucial part for everyone listening, how do you actually do this correctly? Because I can see how if you do it wrong, you could just be reinforcing bad habits.
Or just get completely overwhelmed and quit. Yeah, the execution is critical. And the very first step, before you even press play, is material selection.
Right, setting the stage.
This is paramount. Garbage in, garbage out. If you shadow unclear or poorly pronounced audio, you are training your brain and your mouth incorrectly. So the sources lay out very specific criteria.
First up, clear native pronunciation. That seems obvious.
It is, but it's worth stressing. No background noise, no bad microphones. You need audiobooks, high-quality podcasts from major networks, TED Talks, NPR. The model has to be clean and consistent.
Okay, second criteria, and this is the one I think people will push back on. It has to be at natural speed. Why avoid those slow for learners recordings? They seem so much more manageable.
It feels harder, I know, but it's essential. The whole goal is to be automatic at real speed. If you only ever train at half speed, that's the fastest you'll ever be comfortable speaking.
You're putting a ceiling on your own fluency.
You are. And you miss the conditioning for how sounds blend together in natural speech. The natural speed creates the pressure that your brain needs to build that bypass circuit we talked about. The discomfort is a sign of adaptation, not failure.
I see. And finally, variety. Different accents, different tones.
Crucially important. If you only ever listen to one American news anchor, you'll be lost when you talk to someone with a British or an Australian accent. You need to train your ear on formal lectures, casual chats, high-energy interviews. It builds your cognitive flexibility.
Okay, so materials are selected. We have our high-quality 90-second audio clip. The sources then lay out a 7-step process. Steps 1 and 2 are basic prep. Quiet place, headphones, and have the transcript handy.
The prep is key because shadowing takes immense focus. Headphones are mandatory to catch every little detail, and the transcript is optional, but highly, highly recommended, especially at first. It links the sound to the spelling.
Then step 3 is the warm-up, which I thought was a brilliant idea. Listen first without speaking. Just focus on the melody.
This step is non-negotiable, and it's the one everyone wants to skip. Before you even try to make words, you have to internalize the musicality, the prosody, just listen for the rise and fall, the stress, the flow.
And then hum it.
Yes, try to hum the intonation without the words. You're separating the rhythm training from the word training. You're prioritizing the music, which is foundational to sounding natural.
It's like learning the dance steps before you try to sing the song. Okay, so then step 4, the first pass. This is where the rubber meets the road. You play a tiny segment, 5 to 15 seconds, and shadow immediately.
This is the moment of simultaneity. You match everything: sound, rhythm, speed. And the most critical instruction here is Do not stop to worry about understanding every word.
That's so hard to do.
It is, but you have to. The first few passes are purely physical, a motor exercise. If you stop to translate or look up a word, you've shattered the flow and you defeat the entire purpose. Your brain has to learn to keep going.
Step 5 is about building on that. Repeat and build up.
Patience and repetition. You pause, you rewind, you practice that little 5-second chunk until it feels comfortable, until you find the groove. Then, and only then, do you start stringing those chunks together into longer sentences or a full paragraph.
And after you've nailed the physical part, step 6 is where you bring the meaning back in, adding depth and emotion.
Right. This is the bridge back to communication. Once the mimicry is comfortable, you focus on conveying the same emotion as the speaker. If they sound excited, your voice has to have that same energy. If they sound serious, you replicate that tone.
So you're moving from a mechanical exercise to actual speech practice.
You are. You're activating your expressive skills, making sure the sounds you make carry real meaning.
And the final step, step 7, is the feedback loop. Record and compare. The moment of truth.
It can be brutal, but it's absolutely essential. Use your phone, it's perfect. Play the original segment, then immediately play your version. You will instantly hear the differences that your brain was filtering out.
Where your rhythm is off or where you're mispronouncing a vowel.
Exactly. It gives you an objective roadmap for what to work on next time. It's almost impossible to fix unconscious errors without that kind of external, accurate feedback.
Okay, so we have the steps, but let's talk about the troubleshooting. I know a lot of people try this, hit a wall, and then quit, thinking it's not for them. The sources had a great list of common pitfalls and how to fix them.
Yes, and knowing these in advance can save you a lot of frustration. The roadblocks are predictable, and so are the solutions.
Let's start with the biggest one. Feeling like you're speaking too slowly, just stumbling over everything.
Mistake number 1, for sure, speaking too slowly. Your instinct is to slow down so you can be more clear. The fix requires a big mental shift. You have to accept that you're going to stumble. That's part of it.
So you prioritize the rhythm over perfect clarity.
You have to. If you only focus on getting every word perfect, you sacrifice the speed and you lose the whole benefit of training automaticity. The clarity will come with practice. You have to keep the pace up, even if it sounds a bit messy at first.
What about the musicality part? For a lot of learners, their native language might be more monotone, so their English can sound very flat.
That's mistake number 2, ignoring intonation and stress. This is probably the biggest thing that makes someone sound foreign, even if their pronunciation of individual words is perfect.
So how do you fix it?
You have to shadow everything, not just the words, the pauses, the little upward ticks in pitch, the emotion, even the laughter if it's there. You have to become obsessed with why a speaker stressed a certain word. That's what makes you sound expressive and natural.
Here's a huge one I've heard people complain about. You're shadowing along, and then you hit a word you don't know. The brain just freezes.
Mistake number 3, getting stuck on unknown words. A total flow breaker. The second you stop to look up a word, you've broken that auditory motor circuit you're trying to build.
So what's the solution? Just
guess.
The solution is rigorous. You quickly jot the word down if you can, but you keep shadowing. Do not stop the flow. Part of the magic of this is training your brain to handle ambiguity, to infer meaning from context, which is a critical skill for real conversation.
So the immediate goal of maintaining flow is more important than the immediate goal of understanding that one word.
Exactly. Fluency is about speed and continuity. You can look up the word later.
The source is also warned against just picking any old audio file, especially if it's boring. Right. Mistake 4, using boring or unauthentic materials. Shadowing takes a ton of concentration. If you're not interested in the topic, you just won't stick with it long enough to see results.
So pick something you'd listen to for fun anyway.
Absolutely. Comedy, science, business, whatever you're into, and make sure it's authentic. Real conversations, not sterile textbook recordings. You need to learn how people actually talk.
And the last big pitfall, practicing in a vacuum with no external check-in.
Yes. Mistake number 5, shadowing too much without feedback. This is dangerous because you can develop and reinforce bad habits without even realizing it. Maybe you consistently mispronounce one sound and you're just cementing that error every single day.
Because you can't hear your own mistakes.
We're often deaf to them. So the solution is periodic feedback. Share your recordings with a teacher, a language partner, or even use some of the new AI pronunciation tools. You need an outside ear to catch what you're missing.
Okay, so with those mistakes in mind, let's talk about customizing the technique. How does this look different for a beginner versus someone who's already pretty advanced?
Customization is everything. One size does not fit all here. You have to adjust the speed, the complexity, and your focus based on your current level.
So for a total beginner, what's the starting point?
For a true beginner, the goal is just foundational exposure, simple mimicry. You use very short segments of very clear, simple material. Graded readers are perfect for this.
So just shadow one short phrase at a time.
One phrase. The focus is purely physical, just getting your mouth moving and connecting the sound you hear to the sound you make. You don't even have to worry about 100% comprehension at this stage. It's just motor activation.
And what about for intermediate learners? This is where I feel like most people get stuck.
This is where the technique can create the biggest breakthroughs. Intermediate learners need to jump straight into natural speed materials, podcasts, news, real conversations.
And the focus shifts.
The focus shifts heavily from just making sounds to mastering the musicality, the stress, the intonation, the rhythm. And this is the stage where you absolutely must start recording and comparing your speech to iron out those differences in accent and flow. They have the vocabulary. Now they need the delivery system.
And for those at the top aiming for that native-like fluency, what's left for them to do?
For advanced learners, shadowing is about nuance and complexity. You have to seek out cognitively challenging content. Political speeches, fast-paced debates, dense academic lectures, even stand-up comedy.
Stand-up comedy would be incredibly hard with all the timing and cultural references.
It's the ultimate challenge. You're focusing less on basic pronunciation and more on picking up insider phrases, idioms, and the subtle cultural cues that separate a fluent speaker from a native one. You're polishing the final edges.
So we have the basic technique, we know how to tailor it. But let's talk about some advanced variations to keep the practice fresh and targeted. Shadowing isn't just one thing.
No, it's a flexible framework. You can and should modify it to target your specific weaknesses. The sources outlined 5 key variations.
Let's start with the 2 most fundamental approaches. Using the script or going in blind.
Right. So scripted shadowing is what we talked about earlier. You're reading the transcript while you shadow. This is fantastic for visual learners because it directly links the spelling of a word to its sound. It really helps lock in vocabulary.
And then the opposite, blind shadowing, is like taking the training wheels off.
It is. You shadow without looking at any text. You rely purely on your ear. This forces your brain to process sound much more quickly, and it's essential training for understanding rapid, blended speech in real life when you don't have a script to follow.
Then there's chunked shadowing. This sounds perfect for those long, complicated sentences that can really trip you up.
It's a great tool for managing cognitive load. You just break a long sentence into short, meaningful phrases or chunks. You master each little chunk individually, getting the rhythm just right, and then you string them together. It helps you master phrase-level rhythm, not just word-level rhythm.
Okay, and what the source is called spontaneous shadowing sounds like the final boss battle. Training with weights.
It really is. This is for advanced learners. You try to shadow live content. A live radio show, a TV broadcast, even the person you're talking to, with no ability to pause or rewind.
It sounds terrifying.
It's a brutal simulation of real life. It pushes your brain to its absolute limit and hones those real-time processing skills you need for truly fluid conversation.
And finally, my favorite one, theatrical shadowing.
This is where you get to have fun with it. You channel your inner actor. You don't just mimic the speaker's emotion, you exaggerate it. You overperform their enthusiasm or their conviction. You even copy their gesture.
And that's not just for fun. There's a reason for it.
There is. The exaggeration helps to cement that expressive language deep into your memory. It makes the emotional contours and intonation patterns physical and unforgettable, ensuring your own speech becomes more dynamic and less flat.
It's amazing how scalable this is. Let's connect it now to some very specific high-stakes goals that our listeners might have, like for presentations or exams.
It's perfectly suited for that because you can tailor the source material so precisely. If you're prepping for a job interview or an exam like the TOEFL or IELTS,
you shouldn't be shadowing a cartoon.
Exactly. You shadow materials that mirror that style. For a business presentation, you shadow TED Talks. You focus on their pacing, their persuasive pauses. For an academic exam, you shadow formal news reports or university lectures to get comfortable with that structured formal language.
What about for professionals who need specific language for their field, business or academic English?
You have to dive right into the jargon. Find business podcasts in your industry. Find lectures from your field of study. Shadowing that technical language builds absolute comfort, so when you're in a high-stakes meeting, those complex terms just flow out naturally as a chunk.
And for someone with a very specific goal, like accent reduction or wanting to acquire a certain accent?
Then the technique becomes hyper-focused. You choose one specific model speaker whose accent you really admire. A particular news anchor, a certain actor.
And you just shadow them exclusively.
Repeatedly and intensely. You're trying to fine-tune your pronunciation to match their exact vowel sounds, their rhythm, their specific regionalisms. You're building a precise acoustic template in your brain and training your mouth to reproduce it perfectly.
This all sounds incredibly effective, but it requires discipline. How do you actually make this a real lasting habit?
The sources are very clear on this. The key is that consistency beats marathon sessions.
So no cramming.
No cramming. 10 to 15 focused minutes every single day is neurologically far more effective than a 2-hour session once a week. The brain needs that daily repetition to build and strengthen those automatic pathways.
And the importance of tracking your progress. Keeping those recordings.
Absolutely. You need to see the evidence of your growth to stay motivated. Compare your recording from week 1 to your recording from week 4. The difference in your flow and confidence can be astonishing, and that's the fuel that keeps you going.
And finally, you have to connect it to the real world. It can't just be an isolated exercise.
It has to be reinforced. After you shadow a clip, immediately try to use what you learned. Write a summary of it using the new phrases. Or jump into a conversation with a language partner and try out the new rhythmic patterns. You have to apply it to make it stick.
And above all,
choose content you love. If the process is a joy, not a chore, it will become a habit.
We have covered so much ground here. From the origins of shadowing in interpreter schools to the neuroscience of these high-speed brain circuits, all the way to a practical guide. But the core value seems crystal clear now. Shadowing is the bridge between just knowing English and actually living it.
It is. It builds that real-world fluency, it sharpens your accent, and it really reduces that fear of speaking that holds so many people back.
And the sources had some really inspiring success stories to prove that.
We really did. Yeah. There was Maria, the IT professional who used it, and her colleagues actually noticed the change. She said she finally started thinking in English.
And Jen, the university student who finally cracked fast-paced British accents by shadowing BBC interviews.
And Ahmed, the professional interpreter who still uses it every morning as his warm-up, his secret weapon to keep his mind and his accent sharp. These aren't small gains, they're transformative breakthroughs.
It's the difference between cautiously walking through a language and just running, expressing yourself fluently and automatically.
And this brings us to the final, really provocative thought from the sources. Shadowing requires you to copy not just the words, but the emotion of the speaker.
Right.
And that act of forced replication of trying to sound enthusiastic or critical or joyful, it forces you to engage with the language as a real communication tool, not just a set of rules.
So the question for you, the listener, is this. If language is just as much about communicating feeling as it is about communicating fact, what powerful shift happens in your mind when you deliberately try to replicate a speaker's emotional state, their conviction, their excitement, not just their sounds?
Think about the confidence that's unlocked when your speech isn't just correct, but it carries authentic emotional weight. Where does that expressive practice take your confidence, and how quickly does it transform your interactions? Don't just copy the words, copy the life in the words.
That's a great thought to leave with. Thank you for diving deep with us into the power of shadowing. Now go find your favorite high-quality audio and start speaking along.